Good afternoon. My name is Joanne Murphy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Chartered Banker Institute, and welcome to our webinar in celebration of International Women's Day, focused on the importance of addressing gender diversity, with which we're delighted to partner with WIBIF. In a moment, I'll hand over to our panellists for introductions, but before we get into our discussion, it's important to recognise the purpose of today in celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women. It's incredible to believe that the first International Women's Day was held over 110 years ago. In the UK, we're fortunate that laws provide us with protection and rights that some women do not yet benefit from globally. And although much progress has been made and global awareness raised through movements such as Me Too, there's still much more that needs to be done. According to the World Economic Forum, we are unlikely to see gender parity in our lifetime, and sadly, potentially our children's. I'm proud that over 50% of the Institute's members are female. And although great progression has been made in banking and finance, we still see the majority of our female members only completing foundation level qualifications. Improving the environment, which provides the opportunity for progression, is one of my greatest challenges. I'd like to invite chartered female members and women who've worked in banking for over 10 years to consider fellowship at the Institute. From challenge comes change, so let's all choose to challenge. And now I'd like to hand over to my esteemed panel for introductions, who can share how they have faced and overcome their own challenges. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Stacey Lam, and I'm a Financial Services Organisational Agility and Transformation Leader at PA Consulting, with over a decade of FS industry experience. I am also on the board of Women in Banking and Finance, and we are a not-for-profit, volunteer-led network dedicated to connecting individuals and institutions across the financial services sector, as well as increasing women's visibility, participation and engagement in financial services at all levels. We aim to connect, challenge and inspire our members to engage in honest conversation and active interventions to drive the changes in attitudes, behaviours and structures in the financial services sector necessary to unlock genuine opportunities for all. And I was also a Chartered Banker Young Banker of the Year finalist in 2017.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me along today to join this great panel to celebrate International Women's Day. My name is Helen Mckay. I started my career 35 years ago with Clydesdale Bank in retail banking, reaching the position of branch manager before I moved across to business credit. In 2014, I joined fintech lending platform called Lending Crowd and currently hold the position of credit assurance manager. I gained my fellowship of the Institute in 2017, which was one of the highlights of my career, and was appointed as chairperson of the Edinburgh, Lothians and Fife District Centre and vice chair of Membership Forum in 2019. Last year, Innovate Finance named me on its Women in FinTech Power List.
And good afternoon, everyone. It really is an honour and a pleasure to be here with everyone today. My name is Marlene Shields, and I'm the Chief Executive of Capital Credit Union based in Edinburgh. And we're a small community bank, if you're not familiar with the term credit union. I'm also the chair of the Financial Conduct Authority Smaller Business Practitioner Panel, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And in the last couple of years, I've also been the advisor to the Duchess of Cornwall on financial inclusion. And I gained my fellowship. I've got an honorary fellowship of the Chartered Banker Institute, which was awarded in 2016, one of the absolute highlights of my career. And because I came to financial services very late, I was pushing 40 and before I saw the light and got into credit unions and indeed into financial services. So, but I'm a great advocate of what the Institute does in terms of education, because that's one of my absolute passions is education and applying education to financial resilience. And I hope we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about that as well. So lovely to be here.
Thank you, Marlene, and you're welcome. And last but not least, Anna, can I introduce you, please?
Thank you, Joanne. Hello, everyone. Really delighted to be here this afternoon. My name is Anna Jamalai. I am a business manager supporting the lending business in the Cooper Bank, working for Barclays. Gender equality and gender equity has been an area of passionate focus for me for a very long time and continues to be that. Some of you may remember me from the Young Banker final in 2020, where my proposal naturally was also linked to gender equality. Very much looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Anna, and you're welcome. Helen, I'd actually like to start off with the first question to you, please, because we know that you have the longevity in terms of career. And one of the things that we are interested in is that we've witnessed during your career, what changes have you witnessed in terms of gender diversity in banking and finance? So what sort of progress have you seen in that period, would you say?
So obviously I started in the 80s, which was very much your females were probably held up your branch banking, you know, they were your tellers and your back office people. And there's very, very few senior positions held by females. And it wasn't actually until the early 90s before I actually came across a female that held a managerial position. Up till then, it was all supervisory positions, was as far as you were going to get. Then banking sort of changed the split, retail and business banking, and that opened up more opportunities. But you also saw that the females were starting to become branch managers, but that's because the guys were wanting to focus on the business banking side, which was a lot more sort of chunky, and there was a bit of a, not saying a boys club network that sort of evolved, but it was almost like that because they had that prestige. And I have been led to understand that still goes on somewhere, although there's more female business banking managers around. There's still a little bit of a nepotism there that, you know, females are excluded slightly. But back in the retail side, as well as having more female managers in the 2000s, female area managers started to develop, and they were great, some really good role models. I managed to work under a couple of them. And then when I moved to business credit, that unit was actually set up by a female. And the two more senior leadership people within that team as well were female. So it was a very much a female-led unit. And eventually, I think we actually ended up being an entire female unit for a little while, which was really quite rewarding. To see that happening, all these business managers and the male side submitting applications and looking for guidance and help from us, which was quite empowering, really. But you also started to see people like Lynn Peacock and Susan Rice sort of emerging as CEOs and leading banks, and these days we've got Debbie Crosby and obviously Alison Rose amongst others. But quite interesting, when I was looking at all these females that were sort of leading banks, if you look at it, they were all Scottish-based banks. So Scotland's obviously got a bit more of insight and helping to lead the way there, really. I've been led to understand that some banks, because obviously I'm not in banking anymore, but they're starting to use tools to sort of target adverts for jobs to more females, to try and attract them to apply for them, because we're notoriously bad for sort of looking at job adverts and thinking, oh well, I can't do everything that's on that list. But they're sort of trying to specifically target females into more senior positions. And I also believe there's another bank that's also specifically ensuring that there's always a female candidate at all job interviews. to give everyone a better chance. And then on the fintech side, which is obviously where I am now, I was first employee of Lending Crowd, and I'm pleased to say that I was hired because of my skills, and what's pretty much a male-dominated industry when you think about all the tech guys, and business development, underwriting is still very much a male-dominated area as well. But Nicola Anderson has just taken over as CEO of FinTech Scotland, and one of her goals is to see more diversity and inclusion and future talent, which is really encouraging. And just to finalise there, that you know, some of the top banks are actually introducing schemes that will help female entrepreneurs as well, which is also really quite rewarding.
Thanks, Helen, and that was 35 years really right across the industry. So that is, you know, it's a huge breadth from that sort of starting position where, you know, women were more in the back office and administrative roles to start to see them coming through time. So it's really interesting to see that sort of trajectory. Marlene, do you think that's because you've spoken a lot in the past about role models, and Helen mentioned that there as well, but in your career and sort of finance and coming into it when you did, have you seen much change in women's role within banking and finance over that period?
Yeah, I think I have, Joanne. I mean, I might be longer in years than most around the panel, but as I say, I'm new to the financial services in the sector, and I've 20 years under my belt, but I have seen progress and considerable progress, although equally we have a long way to go. You know, we'll look at the stats, and I know Stacey has some stats for us, and you know, they're getting better, but we're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination. But if I think about certainly over the last couple of years, and particularly my role in the Financial Conduct Authority, I've been on the smaller business practitioner panel now for just over 5 years, and I am the first woman to hold that position ever since the panel was set up. And when I was recruited to the chair of the FCA panel, there are 4 statutory panels that are set up in law by the FCA as advisors to the FCA. And of those 4 panels, when I was recruited 18 months ago as the chair, 2 of the other panels also had new chairs, and they were all women. So at this moment in time, we have 3 women in 3 of the 4 positions, which is the first time ever. So there is progress. There's absolutely progress, but we do have a long way to go to get more women into leadership positions, I think.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Marlene. Stacey, it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on this. So coming into, you know, slightly less years experience, but a different type of experience, and joining banking at a different period in time. So your thoughts, what have you seen any change since your career began?
Yeah, perhaps not as stark as Helen. I started my career actually as a management trainee at HSBC just before the financial crash of 2008. So already working in quite an inclusive environment then, and I've seen that continue to shift. But the progress that I'm really witnessing now are largely based around organizations and their leaders' ESG priorities. And you can see that coming from a board level, actually. And I think it's really quite fascinating that the leaders that I'm seeing who are creating the conditions within their organizations, and actually I think probably societal conditions to allow for inclusion to flourish, and to allow for diverse people, individuals who are different, to bring together their thought leadership. I think it's that shift in progress that we're witnessing now. It's a real shift in culture, centering around the visions and purposes of people bringing their best selves to work. And that is probably the biggest progress I've seen from, you know, when I first started at the bank, where it was still very much, you know, the branch manager sat behind a closed door, and each of us, to Helen's point, we each had a very specific role. Whereas now actually we see that multidiscipline teams, people collaborating, actually bring the best out of one another, and that diversity of thought is the progress that I'm witnessing around me, and it's a positive. I definitely feel that.
Yeah, definitely.
You went on mute, Joe. You're on mute.
Unmute. My key quite happily slipped back into mute there. It was always going to happen at some point, no doubt. Thank you, Stacey, for that. And I don't know if you've got anything that you would want to build on in your time with Barclays.
Yes, just a couple of milestones that I'd like to mention here. I joined the industry as a summer intern in 2014 that I felt was quite a crucial time for change, and I also felt that the conversations around gender equality in the corporate world were normalized. So when I joined the organization, there was a well-established internal gender network. A couple of months after, Barclays was one of the first signatories for the He for She massive UN campaign that aimed to engage more men into the movement. That also was a positive change. In 2015, we also got the Why Diversity Matters report from McKinsey, so linking to what Stacey was saying about the importance of diversity of thought for commercial performance as well. This was the first of its kind that really showcased how companies that had a higher gender and ethnicity diverse workforce outperformed the rest at a rate of about 35%. And then shortly after that, we also saw the Equality Act that in 2017 required companies with at least 250 employees to publish their gender pay gap, just again bringing to light the fact that while we may attract more women in the industry today, they are still occupying sort of the more junior positions into a company. So in many ways, I do recognize the privilege of my generation to join at a time where we certainly feel more empowered to actually be part of the conversation and really be a driving force in the changes that we wish to see, particularly when I think about the generation of women before me, starting with my family, with my grandmother born in my home country, Albania, with no prospects other than to raise a family, progressing to my mother, who was able to follow education and pick the career that she wanted. But when she decided to be a mother, they came with a cost. So she had to pick between the two, to myself now being able to pick my own path. So I think progress is there and has been made and is to be recognized. However, like the rest of the panel was saying, there is a long way to go.
There definitely is, and thank you for sharing, Anna, around that. Stacey, can I maybe come back to you then on a point, because as Anna highlighted, there's still so much more to do, and so much more that needs to be done. So to help for people that are listening to the webinar today, is there any sort of tools or resources out there that can help, that you've either deployed in your own career or your own development, that you would recommend to other people?
Yeah, and actually, you know, tools and resources mean different things to different people. And I thought one aspect that I think has crucially helped me in my career, and I think is available to all if we know how to seek it, is ensuring that you have a really strong sponsor, coaching if it's available to you, and a mentor. That those three very different and quite specific different roles and three types of people have really helped me in my career. And actually, they've helped me focus on my own career development and that kind of view of what my longer term goals are. But I'd say of the three, particularly for me, that the most vital has been having a senior sponsor. And I've been fortunate enough to have various senior sponsors throughout my career. But a sponsor to me is somebody who can endorse you, advise you, and really influence the success you can have within your organization. And as I said, I have been fortunate to have both male and female sponsors, but I guess it goes without saying that there are more men at the exec level, and so finding a senior female sponsor is sometimes difficult, actually, particularly in smaller organizations where there potentially are less women at the board and exec level. But I have to say that I have found some incredible female sponsors throughout my career, and finding a woman who inspires you, somebody who trusts me and endorses me, I think is the best first-hand learning I've had, and in having a female sponsor, I've really found that my career path and my learning has elevated because of that. And actually, it's interesting because at Women in Banking and Finance, in conjunction with a number of sponsors and our partners, the Wisdom Council and the London School of Economics, we published our first of what's called the Accelerating Change Together research. And we did that, the first report came out in November 2020. And in that, 62% of women stated that they aspired to become senior leaders. However, 79% stated that they saw barriers in achieving that aspiration. So within that research, we had a wonderful lady called Dr. Grace Lorden, who's the founding director of the Inclusion Initiative at the London School of Economics, give her perspective. And in it, she stated that more men are likely to say that they have senior sponsors and senior advisors within their organizations that they can go to for advice. And equally, they're more likely to be of the same gender. So I would challenge everybody actually on the call to consider, if you don't have a sponsor within your organization, who could you reach out to? Who would be your advocate, your ally within the organization? And if you do already have one, how are you working with them to ensure that they're bringing the best out of you and that you're actually getting that championing within the organization? Because interestingly, there is still quite an ethos for women who perhaps feel as if they have imposter syndrome, that feeling that they don't belong at the table, or that their voice isn't perhaps on parity with their male colleagues. And actually, in having a sponsor and somebody who can champion you, even when you're not in the room, that's how we start to shift the dial on equality and parity within financial services. And then finally, I think this was one piece of advice a sponsor gave me, which I found really quite important, which was really ensure that you're confident within yourself about what your brand is, who you are, who you stand for, and what you're skilled at. And I actually found that quite challenging to think about initially. But as I've progressed through my career, I've really become confident. And actually, when we do choose to challenge, our theme today on International Women's Day, being brave, being confident, and standing behind your own principles and your own vision really helps endorse yourself. And it helps your sponsors and coaches endorse you as well.
No, I think that's a brilliant point, and some great aspects that you brought out there round about that, feeling that imposter syndrome, and also people not recognizing that the difference, the things that make you different are actually incredible strengths, because you're
absolutely
yourself. So I absolutely agree with that. Marlene, I've seen lots of nodding of your head there, just to bring you in this point, and obviously you've had a very successful career, so we're really interested to understand what sort of resources have you deployed in your own development that you would recommend to others.
Yeah, everything that Stacey says, I absolutely endorse. I think she's absolutely spot on. And she also said that for everybody it's different. And for me, there's two things that are absolutely critical to my development, the successes that I've had and the achievements. And that is a good mentor. A good mentor, you just cannot underestimate what that person will bring out of you, if you like. But a good mentor is critical, but as is for me a supportive network. And again, I can't underestimate the importance of building up your own network as you work through your career, because both have helped me enormously. And like Stacey, I've had male and female mentors. I've been very, very fortunate in the short 20 years I've been in financial services. But I would also say to everyone who's on the call, we often think about mentors as being older people, people who are successful, who've been there, who've done that, who've got the t-shirt. But mentors come in all shapes and forms. And I've been really fortunate over the last couple of years to mentor quite a number of young women in financial services, not only in the United Kingdom, but also in the US and Africa. And I can tell you, I learn something every time that engagement happens, every single time. So what I would say to all the young women out there, you know, think about being a mentor to an older person as well, because you have so much to give. You've got fresh perspectives to give, and you can teach each other. So, you know, try not to think about it as a one-way process. It's an engagement for both. And I have an absolutely fabulous, I think, example of this. The Chartered Banker Institute, as I guess everyone will know, has the 2025 Foundation, which is very much about bringing young people on and bringing people into financial services who wouldn't necessarily be there. And part of that is mentoring. And when the foundation was really getting off the ground, I was asked to mentor a young woman who at the time was actually an employee of the Institute. Her name is Yasmin. And I learned so much from her, and I hope she learned a little bit from me. But today, Yasmin is the youngest board member of my credit union. So she came along to lend her voice, to tell us what young people need from financial services these days, because we weren't doing a very good job here at Capital Credit Union. And she came along to one of my strategy days, and my board was so impressed. And I can tell you at the time, my board was predominantly middle-aged white male, and this has gone back 3 or 4 years ago. But they were so impressed with her, they asked her to come on the board of directors, and she was 29 years old at the time, which, you know, we're just so proud of her. And, you know, we can credit Yasmin, or we can credit the credit union. But today, actually, my board, we have more females than males around the board table for the first time in our history, and more younger people. So, you know, go back to the first question, things are changing. But in terms of resources and tools, think about mentoring and thinking about being a mentor, regardless of your age, but build that network of people around you as well. It's so important to get that feedback, to be able to share and to get that positivity as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, actually, Joe. I completely agree, Marlene. At PA, we have a reverse mentoring scheme, and it's really successful in just challenging, again, diversity of thought and bringing about that inclusion in a way that's probably quite simple to do, but equally really impactful.
And I actually, just building on that point, Stacey, and that you've made there, we actually do have a mentor tool for it's almost like a dating online, for not quite dating, but we do have a tool for our members to use. So, you know, mentoring is so important. And as Marlene said, reverse mentoring, and there are tools there available to everyone to use, where you can connect to anybody. They might be in a different country, somewhere else across the world, as Marlene says, give you a different perspective, whether you're studying, whether you're looking at career progression, or whether you've just got a personal challenge to work through and work, then they're there. So use that resource that is available to you to use. Helen, can I bring you in? Because I think it would be interesting from your perspective, because obviously you've changed, your career's changed and developed over time. One constant's always been your membership of the Institute as well during that period. And would there be anything that you would call out in particular in terms of resource or support in your own career development that you used?
I mean, right at the beginning, one of the reasons I joined banking was so I could obtain a professional qualification. I didn't want to go to university. And at that time it was, you know, there's very few females sitting their banking exams, although it was starting to increase. But for me, by completing your I think even my managers were very, very good in encouraging me to sit my exams and even go on and sit the second part of the membership, because I thought, oh, no, I've done a bit, that's it. But I think by getting a professional qualification, it helps people to realise that you're treating your career seriously. And I know as the years evolved, there was quite a few job applications that didn't actually state that you should have your exams, which previously, you know, you automatically got promoted when you had your exams, but then as time went on, you had to demonstrate that you could do the job as well. So for me, having my members qualification has been a key thing in my career, I would say. That and just, you know, doing your best and being professional, you know, I think that goes a long way to make you feel recognised and gives you more confidence as well to say that, well, you have achieved that. And the support material that the Institute provides now as well, you know, you can dip in and out, and there's a lot of good tools there to help build your confidence and your soft skills.
I think that's a really good point. I think it alludes to a point that Stacey made previously as well, which was about that, you know, women need to feel as if, you know, if you're going for a job, you have to tick every single box in the job before you apply.
So the statistic was a woman would look to tick 8 out of 10 of the checklist in order to apply, and on average, I'm not suggesting that this is across the board, a man would tick 2 or 3 out of 10 before wanting to apply. So yeah,
it's just like anything, you know, anything that you can do that makes you feel more confident, that makes you feel, you know, that you can apply for these jobs, to take that opportunity. Again, your challenge and potentially going for a new role, to just take that, you know, and just the worst that can happen is they say no, or that you actually get a really good challenge that will stretch your skills and knowledge and take you to a different place. But it's about trying and putting yourself forward, isn't it? Definitely.
yeah.
Anna, I was going to just bring you in, but maybe just to ask a slightly different question, and almost related to, we've talked a wee bit about progress that we've seen over time, what changes still to come, and the momentum that's been driven by certain initiatives that we've seen in recent years as well. But we've also just dealt with, and we're still dealing with, a global pandemic, and there's been much written about the impact of that overall, and addressing diversity. So what do you think the impact of the pandemic has been in addressing diversity, and do you think that organisations could do any more?
Yes, definitely. So I think I like to start by a personal favorite stat that I think really kind of quantifies why we still need to challenge gender bias, and why even sessions like this are still very much needed despite the progress made. So according to the World Economic Forum's 2020 Global Gender Gap report, despite progress at current pace, it would take over 200 years to close the current economic gap between men and women. In practice, that is at least another 10 generations of women that would have to navigate an unequitable playing field. And there is no doubt that the current COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis that came with it has only amplified the challenges and the inequalities that have existed there for women and girls across the world. There was a recent UN policy brief that was actually launched right after the crisis started in April 2020, showcasing how across the world women earn less and therefore they save less. They're more likely to work in the informal sector. They have less access to social protections, or they form the largest number of single parent households. And therefore, if gender equality is not central to any measures that we're taking, whether that's in the public sector or the private sector, to address COVID impact, we risk really losing the momentum of the progress that has taken years in making. I think from a FI standpoint, in the last 12 months, we've seen the tremendous role that banks have played in ensuring that many, clients are keeping their businesses alive. And I think in the same token, it was just a testament of how financial institutions can really play a crucial role in the real economy during a time of a change of this type of magnitude. I think I would focus or I would highlight 3 key areas that I think are needed for the private sector, or rather FIs, to kind of focus on. For one, I think debunking the myth that gender equality is a luxury for companies that can afford to do so, or whose operations are directly linked to the agenda. And it's precisely this shift in mindset that I think it's needed, from changing the narrative from helping women is a good to have when there is no crisis, to investing in women as a must have. It was a little disappointing to see that the gender pay gap was not enforceable after the crisis hit. And I was really reassured by the amount of companies that continue to report this data regardless of the crisis, because it is even more needed to kind of see the impact that the crisis has had on women during this time. The second point I'd say is intersectionality, and just kind of, it's not just about gender equality, it's about gender equality across all women, and recognizing that the path to success for women is impacted by other factors such as race, ethnicity, cultural backgrounds, social background. And we are seeing more efforts extending beyond trying to get more women into the C-suite positions, which is of course very important and that should stay there, but it's also trying to look at increasing, for example, the support that female as business owners have. So we have the investment code in the UK that is trying precisely to do that. We're also looking at not only at women as employees, but as leaders, as consumers, and as customers, because once we look at women across the different boards, then we ensure that we have that inclusivity even within the same gender as well. And finally, I think the point that's really important as well, particularly in the current crisis, is to really strengthen the understanding that gender equality is not just about social justice. Of course, it is a human right, but it is also essential for the economy. Closing the gender labor gap could add an additional 28 trillion to the global GDP. Research also says that the female economy is currently the largest emerging economy, twice the size of India and China, with a consumer spending likely to be about 15 trillion in 2028. We are experiencing potentially one of the biggest crises since the Great Depression. So investing in women is not just the right thing to do, it's also what's going to really help us to get over this as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Anna, for that really full answer there on that. Stacey, I wanted to bring you in because I think you had a wee bit that you wanted to add there as well.
Yeah, actually, well, I concur with everything Anna said. I was just going to add the perspective of the fact that this is not about men versus women. And at Women in Banking and Finance, in fact, last year, we took the decision to allow men to join our network because it's really recognised that in order to make this shift, you know, this is generational. This is beyond our generation and potentially beyond your children's generation. In order to do that, we have to do this collectively. It's about changing policies, procedures, governmental issues, global issues, as the World Economic Forum demonstrates. So we decided last year that we would open up our network. Now, I get it. It's called Women in Banking and Finance, so it can be a little off-putting, but we have a male allies community now, and it's really important for us to recognise that this has to be inclusive. We all have a part to play in order to keep nudging, because that is what we're doing here. If we all collectively nudge towards where we need to go from a policy and governmental procedure perspective, we hopefully will change that narrative, and we will change that 99.5-year deficit that we're looking into at the moment, which is quite astonishing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point to make about the male allies. This isn't about women against men.
Absolutely not.
It's about, you know, International Women's Day is about celebrating the achievements of women, you know, those socioeconomic, political achievements of women, absolutely. But change will not happen without male allies, without the great male sponsors that we've all engaged with and witnessed throughout our own careers as well. So absolutely need to recognise that. And I think someone's actually from the audience has asked a question about a male panellist, which absolutely right. There's so many male allies out there as well, and that's something certainly we can consider in our next panel event is to have a male ally on the panel as well at the same time. Marlene, I'd like to bring you in because I know that you've got a point that you would like to make.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Stacey just reminded me of something very important. I should have thought about this myself. But for the last 6-7 years, I've been volunteering in Africa, working with African credit unions. And if you think we have it bad in the United Kingdom in gender diversity and lack of gender diversity, you should look at some of the statistics in some of the African countries. It's really, really quite scary. But one of my colleagues and I have been doing training for the last 6-7 years on leadership development for women and getting your voice heard. Because often that's the problem, they can't get their voice heard. And it just reminded me that one of the things that we talk about when we're doing the leadership training for women is, you know, we ask, we do it in quite a fun way. We ask all of the women that we'll have in the training, you know, how many of you have sons? And nearly always, most of the hands go up. And then we start talking about, what are you teaching your sons? Because in Africa, it's about the boy child and the girl child. And the boy child is made to feel more important in so many cultures in Africa. And it's about training mothers to teach their sons to think differently. So we've heard about men in the workplace, and they're absolutely critical to helping women get to where they need to be. But it has to start before that. It can't be just when they get to the workplace and they're already ingrained with that type of thinking. So we have to think about the boy child. We have to think about our sons, and what are we teaching our sons, and how are we teaching them to be respectful and bring their sisters along with them before they even get anywhere near the workplace. So, you know, there is a job to be done at home as well, and indeed in school. So it just reminded me that, you know, absolutely we need to bring the men, because when we run this training, it's open to everybody. It's very much about women getting their voice heard, but we encourage the men to come along as well, because they need to hear these messages. They need to hear what the problems are firsthand. They need to hear from the women who are experiencing you know, not being able to get their voice heard, who are being held back because of their gender, not because of their capabilities. So Stacey, thank you for reminding me about that.
Marlene, I'm just going to keep you for a wee minute, if I may, then, because I've got a support. How important then is it to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality?
Oh my goodness, it's so important to call it out. But it's equally important to do something about it. There's no point in just saying we need, you know, that's not right to do that. Then we have to step up. And, you know, I always say that everybody who's in a decision-making role has the power to change. They have the power to change the culture. They have the power to develop policy. They have the power to level the playing field. But they also have the power to encourage women to put themselves forward when opportunities arise. You know, if I think about back in my career, and I talked about my mentors, I had one particular mentor, and it was my previous chairman who set up the credit union. He was our founder member. And he used to push me into all sorts of situations. And I'm thinking, I can't do that. You know, again, as Stacey said, that imposter syndrome. I was like, no, I'm not the right person for this. He used to really push me. And, you know, but he had the power, he had the authority to make things happen. And I learned from him that as a leader in my business, as a CEO, I have a real responsibility to look at everything we do and create those opportunities for everyone. But where there is an imbalance, to make sure that I do something about that. And I want to give an example, just a very recent example of where gender diversity and diversity are coming to the fore. As I mentioned earlier, I'm on an FCA panel, and for anyone who keeps an eye on what the FCA are doing, which is most of us in financial services, our fairly new CEO, he's only been in the job since October, but our new CEO, Nicole Rathy, one of the top agenda items for him is diversity, and that includes gender diversity. And I'm absolutely delighted. He's just created 5 new senior manager posts, executive director posts, and they've all been recruited to, and they're all women. Now, Nickel will stay, and he's absolutely right. They all got the job because they were the best people for the job. But again, I think it shows that things are changing. And I think it shows that women are now putting themselves forward in a way that they might not have done in the past. So now we have in financial services, one of our regulators, that most of the executive team are women. And, you know, that can't be a bad thing.
No, definitely not. Thank you, Marlene. Anna, can I potentially bring you in here just about how important it is to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality?
I think the one point maybe that I'd like to add to what Marlene just said, it's maybe kind of again linked to the why. I think we often use equality and equity interchangeably, and we have spoken a lot around the incredible progress that we have made in ensuring that today women and men in the face of the law are equal. However, that's what equity comes to play. So quite simply, if we want equality to be the end goal, equity is the means to get there, because it's really what ensures that all women and men have access to the same means, to the same resources to be equally successful. So for example, women can become CEOs, but we only see that happening in around 23% of the Future 500 companies. So demonstrating again that something happens there between from women joining an organization to actually making it to the CEO level. So I think starting to speak about more how do we increase equity to ultimately ensure that full equality across men and women, it's probably the part that we need to emphasize the most.
No, I think that's a terrific point there, and I opened up on that. You know, we do have very many rights and privileges in this country, but that doesn't mean that we see that in everything that we do, and that's why we have to keep having events like this to talk about it and raise awareness, and also to help other people, whether you're male or female, to understand the challenge and work together to overcome it. Stacey, I think you want to come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to completely agree with Anna, and I think the aspect for me is about our future leaders as well. It's vital for me in how do we challenge our industry to better equip ourselves, and we as women become better equipped. So I'm really keen to ensure that we see more women and girls entering into STEM education programs. You know, we're entering into the fourth industrial revolution, and actually our industry has accountability for how women are represented within that. And for those who were quite eagle-eyed and eared as you were joining, you may have heard me mention this, but I follow Scottish Widows on Twitter, and today they launched a piece in regard to data about women's pensions. So and I'm going to read it to make sure I say it correctly, but the average woman in her 20s today is set to retire with £10,000 less, £100,000 less, excuse me, in her pension than a man at the same age. So the challenge that we have there, it's real, but it's about how we equipped women and our future leaders in actually being able to overcome those challenges and have that equity within our organisations.
I think that's an excellent point. So thanks for raising that, as it's a absolutely shocking statistic as well. And it is awful that for as much as the progress that we're seeing, by 2021, we're still looking at a future where the inequality is still there, definitely. So thanks for that, Stacey. So I've got a final question for all panelists to answer. So and Stacey, I'll stick with you because you're off mute just now, if that's okay. So what would you tell your school leaver self? What advice would you give your school leaver self?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this one, and actually for me, I think it's twofold. It's believe in your capability, and actually more so trust your intuition. And as we become a more diverse and inclusive workplace and sector in financial services, having emotional intelligence, which in part is the ability to empathize with others, communicate effectively, think that's the part in me that's really helped me over the years, but equally challenged me quite a lot at the start of my career because it felt out of place within quite a male-dominated environment in financial services. However, as more and more research is conducted, EQ is equally as important as IQ, and actually being able to demonstrate that your intuition and your capability work hand in hand. If I could go back and tell myself now to trust in that, then I probably would have been far more confident sooner in my career.
Yeah, no, that's the really good advice. Thank you, Stacey. Helen, what would your advice be to your younger self?
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, make the most of every opportunity that's given to you, and believe in yourself. And one day you'll find that you've got this incredible wealth of knowledge and experience that you can share with the next generation that's coming along, as hard as it is to accept that you're not 25 anymore. Don't ever be afraid to ask for help, because that's a strength, not a weakness.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, there's some advantages not to be 25 anymore, that's for sure.
Okay.
Marlene, what would you tell your school leaver self?
Pretty much the same as Helen and Stacey, but maybe just to put it into my words, but believe in yourself. I know that is a bit cliched, but you know, I wish when I left school I'd had the confidence that I have today, but I just didn't. But you know, I tell myself, just believe in yourself, believe in what you're capable of. And I'd also say, don't be afraid to dream about what the possibilities are, you know, because so often we start out thinking, well, you know, very little ambition, don't think I could do that, you know, could I be, you know, if someone had said to me at 16, you'll be a chief executive one day, I would have just laughed at them and have been like, you're talking about someone else, not me. You know, because I just wasn't brought up in an environment where you would aspire to be, you know, the head of an organization, even a small one, in one day. But the third piece of advice I'd give myself is surround yourself with positive people. I think people underestimate that, but you get yourself surrounded by people who want to hold you back, who doom and gloom, who don't want to, you know, try. It's the fastest route to the bottom. Surround yourself with people who have your best interests at heart, that want to see you do well, that are positive in their own outlook, because that will make a big difference. It will give you that confidence to dream about those possibilities.
Thank you, Marlene. And Anna, what would you say to your slightly younger self?
So I think, Stacey, you might have covered this in one of your other answers, in terms of just investing most of your energy in figuring out what your purpose is, what makes you tick, rather than trying to fit maybe into the predefined boxes that, whether it's gender norms or social norms or cultural norms, tend to be pushed toward you, particularly at a younger age. And I think in a world of social media with so many pressures and external toxic examples of what success is supposed to look like, of what healthy and beautiful looks like, of what love looks like, I think I would tell myself to focus on figuring out my own path, bearing in mind my values, the things that excite me, and stick to them, and remind myself that probably the most important person I should always try not to let down is first and foremost your own self. So just kind of focusing on that inner journey, because that's, I think, where, you know, kind of confidence flourishes. I think that's the soil in which you can have the self-belief and the confidence that, like the ladies were saying, it's probably one of the biggest gifts that comes with experience and age.
Thank you, Anna. I think I would, if I was answering that question to me, I think I would be very similar to some of the other answers, and I think I mentioned this in the earlier question, is about valuing your uniqueness. We tend to think that because we're different, we've got different ideas from other people, that we're not quite fitting in with what everyone else is saying, that in some way that's a barrier, that those differences, and however we see those differences, we see that as a barrier, where actually you bring something unique to the table, and actually that's an asset and not a drawback. And that's what people need to realize, that your differences are actually what makes you an asset round the table, and you need to believe in yourself and take that forward. So so before, I think I've maybe got time for one or two questions. I've seen a couple of comments about the diversity of the panel, and we will try and make sure that we've got great diversity coming through. You'd have heard me earlier saying that I'd really like to see greater diversity at our fellowship and throughout the Chartered Banker Institute, and certainly that's something that we're seeking to do, and we're keen. We've got a whole load of members who are across the globe and different regions. Obviously lots of people are busy today as well, because there's lots of celebrations of International Women's Day going on as well, but I would like to thank our panel that's taken part today. Stacey, there's one question directly to you, which is about, you mentioned sponsors and mentors, and how would you suggest reaching out to someone for this?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. That's a really good question, because sponsorship shouldn't be daunting. So I would suggest, if you haven't identified a sponsor before, think about your nearest leader. Think about the person you would go to perhaps get a stretch project, something that you can work on in addition to your own work. Somebody who would, as I say, champion you when you weren't in the room, and start there, because actually you'll find that that person is probably already endorsing you and is already looking to you as a future leader. And that naturally builds your confidence and helps you progress. In regard to mentoring, there are a number of areas you can get a mentor. I'm certain within many of the larger organizations in financial services, they have mentoring programs. I certainly know that at PA we do. Equally, I have an excellent external mentor via the 30% Club, which is a mentoring scheme. At Women in Banking and Finance, we have a really wonderful mentoring and personal excellence program, as does the Chartered Banker Institute. So there are plenty of places that you can access mentoring, paid for or free. So I would certainly suggest starting your sponsorship conversations quite locally and just really get your confidence going with that. And certainly explore within your own organisation in the first instance for a mentor. And I think, to Marlene's point, expanding your network wherever you can. You know, I know certainly that when I was in the Young Banker of the Year competition in 2017, that's when I first met Marlene and Joe. And you know, you meet people along your path who champion you, who support you, who just enrich your own thoughts. And actually having people like that on your team, as it were, they just help. They help you and help enrich your thinking. So do always look to expand your network. And Helen's point, I couldn't concur with more, which is, don't ever feel foolish for asking a question. You know, the more we ask, the more curious we are, the more we enrich ourselves, and that way we pass it on to others. So I think there's a whole kind of host of answers all stitched together there, but I hope that helps, Amy.
Thanks so much, Stacey. I'm just conscious there's a few questions in, and we're going to run out of time to answer them. Marlene, I'm going to quickly ask you one about, Jenny's asked, what would you say an organisation culture which allows inclusion looks like, that allows it to flourish looks like?
Oh my goodness, that's a really tough question to answer in less than 30 seconds, I guess. And it has to start from the top, doesn't it? And, you know, leaders have to understand that gender diversity is good for business, because I think that's one of the things that is missing sometimes. And, you know, having a culture where people thrive and survive and want to do better and want to do more is absolutely critical, but it needs to come from the top. It needs to come from the board of directors. It needs to come from the CEO and the senior management team to create that culture. I think that's the one thing that we all need to look at. Have we got a culture that helps people to not only thrive and survive, but do really, really well? So that's my starting point.
Okay, thank you so much, Marlene, and we will try and get back to the others that have asked some questions and points from notes. The one question I will answer super quickly, which is someone said, would you say to women to seek women sponsors? No, absolutely not. Male allies are incredibly important. I know that all of us in the panel have all had male allies throughout our career. Men are equally in this journey with us. We will not be able to do it without working together and collaborating together. I'd just like to thank the panel for a great conversation. I think we could have gone on for much longer. Thank you so much, and thank you for everybody for joining us today. I think as the IW International Women's Day theme states, we can all choose to call out gender bias and inequality. We can choose to celebrate women's achievements, but collectively we can create an inclusive world